We are in the regular public business meeting of the East EBMUD Board of Directors for Tuesday, October 13th, 2020. Due to COVID-19 and in accordance with the latest Alameda County health orders and with Governor Newsom's executive order N21-920, which suspends portions of the Brown Act, this meeting will be conducted remotely. And in compliance with those orders, a physical location has not been provided for the meeting. These measures will only apply during the period in which local or public health officials, state or local public health officials have imposed or recommended social distancing. The Planning and the Legislative Human Resources Committees both met this morning and will report out under item 15. We're ready for roll call. All directors, including myself, are participating via Zoom. Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll, please.
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Katz.
Present.
Director Lenny.
Here.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Mellon.
Present.
Director Patterson.
Present.
President Young.
I am here. Okay, moving on to public comment, or I'm sorry, Pledge of Allegiance first. If you'll stand if you're able and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and now we are on to, there are no announcements from closed session. We'll now move on to public comment. If members of the public wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature on the bar at the bottom of your Zoom window. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard at the beginning of the meeting. Comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation, and if applicable, the topic. Or affiliation if applicable, and the topic you'll be speaking on, or the agenda number you'll be addressing. The secretary will call each speaker in the order she receives them. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes. However, I may amend this time at my discretion based on the number of speakers that we have. The secretary will track the time of each speaker and inform you when your allotted time has concluded. We will now, Madam Secretary, do we have anyone wishing to make public comment?
Madam President, we have no one with their hand raised in Zoom for public comment.
Okay, last call for public comment. Going, gone. All right, we'll now take up the consent calendar. There are 12 items before us for consideration. Does anybody have items to pull from the calendar?
I'll move items 1 through 9.
What do we have? Oh,
I'll second.
Oh, why does it say 12 items? I'm sorry, there's only 9 items. I'm just reading the notes. There's just 9 items on consent today.
thank you. There are only 9 items.
Okay, so moving items 1 through 9, we have John Coleman, and a second from who? Frank, okay. All right, roll call, please.
Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon.
Yes.
Director Patterson is muted, and he, I don't believe he knows how to unmute his phone. I'm going to tell him in a minute. President Young.
Yes. Can we capture his vote in retrospect, or is that not allowed by the rules?
I think we need to capture it now. Give me one moment. I'm
Okay.
texting.
Hello?
Hello. All right,
Am I
Director.
getting anybody?
Yes, Director Patterson, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, we need your vote
I
on
kept
the,
saying yes, but I don't think you heard me, so
okay,
the prompter came up and said to dial *6, and I did that. Now I'm in.
thank you. And so we need your vote on the consent calendar, items 1
Yes,
through
I was
9.
voting yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great. We will now move on to determination and discussion. And under item 10, we have Marlene Dumaine with the legislative update. Take it away, Marlene.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good
Several
afternoon.
items for you today. The first is Ledge Report 920, and we have a position recommendation for you on this. This is for HR 6745. It's a federal bill called the Clean Water for All Act, and this is about the waters of the United States. Fairly complicated, so let me try to make this a quick explanation. This gets into the jurisdiction of the Clean Water Act. And the definition of waters of the United States is really what puts the parameters on the extent of the Clean Water Act's jurisdiction. And it's been the subject of controversy for quite some time. The Obama administration adopted rules to define waters of the United States, or navigable waters, because there were some conflicting court opinions out there. And the rulemaking under the Obama administration was fairly broad in terms of the definition, the idea to be more protective for the environment. So it extended to waters that in and of themselves, they were not navigable, but they had a nexus to a navigable water. Last April, the Trump administration adopted rules that negated the Obama rulemaking and went with a much narrower definition of navigable waters. So it's not as protective as the Obama rules. What this bill would do is negate the Trump rules and direct the US EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers to go back and adopt new rules. And they want them to be based in science, and they want them to, hang on, let me pull up my report here and I will tell you. The implementation of the rule will prevent the degradation of surface water quality, prevent increased contaminant levels in drinking water, prevent increased flooding related risk, life or property, and prevent a disproportionate adverse impact on minority or low income populations. We are recommending a support position on this. Any questions?
Marguerite, if I can, in our Ledge Committee this morning, we voted on a 2-0 vote in order to support the staff position on HR 6745.
Okay. I'm 150, 200%, 1000%, whatever maximum percent could possibly be to support this bill. It does have nearly 100 co-sponsors at this point, many from California, including a number of members of our delegation. Not all of them, but most of them.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
I'll move the item
Great, I'll
in
second.
support.
Any other discussion? I see none. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
President Young.
Yes. Okay, unanimous. Do we have more items, Marlene?
We do. I just wanted to give you an overview of the legislative session as sort of a precursor to the end of session report and a quick update on federal, if I may.
Yep.
In terms of the end of session report, you have a hard copy that gives the outcome of all of the position bills from the 2-year session. So it includes what you saw at the end of last legislative year. The very back is a table that summarizes the bill by subject area. Thanks goes to Director Coleman for requesting that we include that in these reports. To put this in context, I wanted to just give you a few little stats here. As you know, 2020 has been highly unusual. And for the legislature also, they had breaks, all unplanned because of COVID. They were confronted with a $60 billion swing in the state budget over a period of 4 months. And because they had so many breaks due to COVID outbreaks in the Capitol and them trying to understand and figure out how are they going to do business, they really narrowed their focus by the end of the year. So to give you a little comparison, in 2019, there were 3,033 bills introduced. In 2020, we were down to 2,390. In terms of chaptered bills, 2019, there was 1,169 bills. 2020, 457 bills. If you look at it in terms of bills that failed, and this really is the indicator that business was not as usual. In 2019, 178 bills failed. In 2020, 3,619 bills failed. They really had to focus. Really looking at the budget, I want to start with that. That was the focus, and it was how do they close that $60 billion gap. Part of it was with federal COVID relief money that came through in the last package, but the budget, some of the budget cuts that were adopted, $11 billion worth, are reliant on more federal aid coming through by October 15th. So given the date today and what's going on with federal negotiations, I think it's safe to say that day one of next year's session is going to be budget focused. In terms of budget areas that we were specifically looking at, there are 4 summarized in the end of session report for you. I'm just going to the page here. Page 11 is where we go into budget items. The first one is the infill infrastructure grant program. That's something that we've tracked for several years as a place to point developers for potential funding if they're partnering with housing agencies. That was initially starting at about a $500 million funding level. About 200 million was shifted to another purpose, and it was going to be backfilled if the federal funding came through. So we may see about 300 million in that as opposed to 500 million, which was what was proposed. The next on PSPS, there was 50 million in general fund money that made it through for grants for community power resiliency activities. Special districts are eligible for that. The next one, this is SB 115, the budget committee bill. On the Safe Drinking Water Fund, there was concern that that fund was going to take a haircut in its first year of existence because of cap and trade revenues. So what the legislature did was they put a backfill in that if it did not get funded at 130 million from cap and trade, that they could borrow from the underground storage tank cleanup fund. So that will be fully funded this year. And then the last item, this is in SB 823. This is the Pine Grove camp. This is the youth correctional camp that is up in our upcountry area. And we do rely on Pine Grove folks to do some of the work on our watershed area. There was intent language included in that budget bill that camp stay open, but they've left it open as to how it would be funded. So it's intent language, it's not codified language, but it is a clear intent to keep that camp open and work with locals to do so.
Marlene, quick question if I can. This is John. In the newspaper today talked about there's been 8 facilities that the governor's budget are going to shut down for
Yes.
firefighting, primarily not juvenile, but more adult correctional. Are they, what might those impacts be? And I don't know where they're located in terms of our firefighting needs, and both locally and upcountry.
We looked at those this morning, and that was part of the overall budget, was to close a number of those adult correctional camps. The camps we rely on are not on the list for closure. So we don't expect an impact.
Thank you.
Another topic is bonds. You may recall at the beginning of 2020, there were 4 different either climate or water related bond proposals in the mix. And towards the end of session, there was an additional item in the mix, which was more of a stimulus sort of infrastructure approach. None of those succeeded. So we don't have a climate or water related bond on the November ballot. What does that mean for next year? It really is too early to tell. I know the state doesn't have a sense of what the full budget impact is in 2020 for COVID on the state budget. And depending on what the state has to do to deal with that will largely affect what happens in terms of any additional climate, water, or stimulus bond discussions at the state level. In terms of policy areas, the best way to couch this is it was sort of a half a loaf. On priority areas, when priorities were narrowed to housing, to wildfire, to budget, budget was done, but still considered half a loaf because we have that $11 billion cuts that would have been reversed with federal aid. But also housing, wildfire, criminal justice, they got a little bit done, but not a lot. So all of those issue areas will carry over into next year. I think we can add to that. Social equity will add for next year. And what we consider normal business was largely unaddressed. And whether they pick that up or have the bandwidth to pick that up, we don't know yet. There's just a lot of uncertainties with COVID. When we look at EBMUD position bills, they really do reflect that theme. The most notable bill that made it to the finish line is ACA 5, which is now on the ballot as Proposition 16. The most notable trend is the usual business type bills failed. So the pollution prevention measures are probably the most obvious. The disposable or flushable, I'll put in quotes, wipes bill, after negotiations, getting everybody on board, we thought it was going to go at the very last minute. It got hung up and did not succeed. The plastic pollution prevention measures also failed. What we're doing now is reaching out to all of our friends in the Capitol who are working from home and navigating sort of election year schedules to get a sense of what they see coming. So when we come back to you in early December with our legislative proposals, we hope to have a better sense of what the legislature hopes to start with in January. So that's the state update. I want to pause for any questions before I do just a couple things on federal. Okay, federal. COVID relief number 4 so far stalled again. The Senate Republicans still want to see a package that is lower in value than what both the White House and the House Democrats want to see. So, I mean, never say never, but it looks like talks have stalled until after the election. And the lame duck session this year, the post-election session between early November and the end of the year, what happens there is largely dependent upon the outcome of the election. But we do know that they've got to deal with spending. The continuing resolution expires on December 12th. They may or may not do more COVID relief. And WRDA is still outstanding, and we're still hearing that they want to get that done by the end of the year. And we still have a difference in approach between the House and the Senate. And so there will be some lively conversations on that during lame duck. And that's all I've got.
Okay, any questions from anyone else? No? Okay.
No,
What, Bill, did you have a question?
no, I didn't.
Okay, thank you, Marlene.
Thank you.
Okay, we now are going to move on to item 11, which is the general manager's report. Clifford?
Yeah, good afternoon. So even before COVID, we've been discussing how we could do more tours and start a speaker series on topics related to East Bay Mud. Since March, people have become more comfortable doing things online, as well as participating in virtual meetings. So for our first presentation, we're going to share with you our plans for self-guided virtual tours and launching a speaker series early next year. And Kelly Zito, Manager of Public Affairs, will make the presentation.
Okay, can you all see my screen, the first slide?
No.
No. Excellent. We're off to a great start.
She looked
That's
so
fabulous.
expectant. She was like,
Okay, let's try this again. We're gonna pick screen 1. Okay, any luck there?
not yet.
Not yet. Hold on, I'm just gonna pause for a second and see if it loads.
Okay.
Is Kelly set to be a host or a panelist so that she can share her screen? Sometimes that's one of the things that needs to be. Oh, there it goes.
Okay, did it go now?
Yep.
No, your Zoom screen. So you need to share your there. Here it comes. It's click your.
Hold on 1 second. Let me try this again.
Okay.
Pull a rope
Apologies.
around it. Pull it in.
Okay. Hold on. I have 3 screens going, so it's a little tricky sometimes. All right. How about now?
Hey.
Yay, I did it. That's it. It's over. No. Okay. Good afternoon, President Young and members of the board. For those of you dialed in on the phone and didn't hear, my name is Kelly Zito. I am the Public Affairs and Community Outreach Manager for East Bay Mud. And today I'm going to update you on our efforts to offer more virtual experiences and learning opportunities as COVID has shifted more activities online. So first off, as of course we know, more people are telecommuting and more kids are distance learning. We've been looking for new ways to engage and educate our customers and stakeholders. So as a first step this year, we consolidated all of our educational resources, our online resources in one place on this webpage. I know the print's a little small here, but hopefully you can see some of the offerings that we have, including where there's a spot here where you can sign up for the virtual wastewater treatment plant tour. And farther down on this page, if we were on the live page, you would see that we have a number of water conservation webinars where they are offering talks on topics from, drought landscaping to lawn replacement rebates. And then of course, on the public affairs side, we've also adapted by moving to online meetings. So we've had a number of ward briefings and then public meetings about specific infrastructure projects on both Zoom and Microsoft Teams. So this summer, you might all remember that we launched a new printed version of our East Bay Trails map. And as part of that, we launched for the first time ever an online version, which is interactive. So I'll show you some features of the actual map itself in a minute, but I wanted to also show you this kind of a preview of the trails. It's called a story map. And so this uses some more rich content to sort of draw you in, to kind of entice you into discovering our trails. And so I'm going to just walk you through this. Hopefully you see that title page. And so you might be familiar with the story map platform. The New York Times and other outlets use this. And again, it's a way to layer really rich content like videos, photos, audio clips, and graphics into a site. So we kind of went through our East Bay trails and, looked at some of the great photos that we have and married those up with some little narrative descriptions of some of our kind of favorites. We highlighted here, most accessible, best morning hike, hidden gems, and that kind of thing. So these photos I think are just fantastic, and hopefully they get people interested in our trails.
They are beautiful, but there's no people in them.
That's true. That is true. I think a lot of these were done with drone shots. And also I should note that we've been trying to be a little more careful about the photos that we have because of a lot of our current photos don't show people with masks on, not of just this, but just in general. So you'll see later on when we go into the Orinda tour, that's just one note that a lot of this content we got together before COVID. So, but yes, ultimately it would be great to have some photos of some more people here. So I'm going to go back into the PowerPoint here. And then, here's how the trail map works. So basically, you can search by trail name if you know it, or you can search by, difficulty level, duration, how much sun or shade it gets, or whether it is, dog friendly, horse friendly, bicycle friendly. And so when you plug in your search, you'll get these results. And then this is what it looks like when you've kind of zeroed in on your trail. I'm not sure why I picked a trail that's 0.15 miles, but it's a very short trail. But you get the sense of how the trail map works, hopefully. All right. So I'm going to move along now. I'm on the next slide. Sorry for the folks on the phone that says Virtual Orinda WTP Tour. So you might recall that early this year, we started a pilot program to show people kind of the behind the scenes operations of the Orinda water treatment plant. And actually earlier in the year, we brought a few high school classes from the service area to Orinda to kind of show them this vital part of our system. Including some students from McClymonds High School. We were able to bring out there, and we had some news coverage for that, which was cool. So of course, once the coronavirus emerged, we had to, think about how we were doing things, and we wanted to definitely keep engaging people and broaden understanding of our work and our systems. I want to highlight here the fact that the wastewater treatment plant, obviously, I mentioned earlier, shifted very quickly to adapt their very popular in-person tours to being online. And of course, you'll be participating in an in-depth virtual tour and workshop on the wastewater treatment plant on October 20th in preparation for the infrastructure workshop on November 10th, which will focus on the wastewater treatment plant's integrated master plan. So those have been a huge hit, both in-person and virtual. And been very popular with the public. I think hundreds and hundreds of people have gone on those tours. So now we wanted to kind of do something for Orinda, showing the main processes and components. And so this is really our first self-guided virtual tour, showing the interior and exterior views of the treatment process. It includes, video, photos, graphics, text, maps, and again, that one note about the photos, you will see people without masks on. So just note that. And then I'm going to take you through it quickly here. And just one word of caution, I think in Zoom, sometimes the video playback is a little bit delayed. So you might get a little bit of a stutter effect, but it actually plays very smoothly, the videos, when you actually visit the site. So I'm going to pull that up now. Here. So let me just share my computer sound. Okay, so here is our story map on Orinda. It's titled From the Mountains to Your Tap. And it talks about, the role of the Orinda treatment plant in our system. It goes a little bit over our source water, of course. And then we've embedded this nice video showing Pardee, which I'm going to attempt to play. Sometimes it just takes a second. Can you hear that and see it? Oh, good.
We can hear and see.
Oh, nice. So again, that's some beautiful drone footage and music that we got. Hopefully it didn't get too stuttery there. We move into a little background about why we treat water. We have a shot here of Susan Teefy in our water quality group, and we have a little audio of her. I won't play every single segment for you, but I just kind of wanted to give you a little sense of it. It's important to show some of the people who work on our systems, of course, and a lot of research has shown that water quality experts are often just the most trusted folks who work at water utilities. And so we thought it was a great thing to get Susan in here. So here's another neat feature of the story map. It lets you place the items that you're talking about. And so here, hopefully you can see, we have our source. Then we flow here into the Macomb. Sorry, it takes a second to load. And then it moves along here, showing Pardee, the aqueducts, and the plant itself. And then of course, our thriving East Bay, our end users here. And so, so we also thought it was important to kind of highlight the history of Orinda. And so here, hopefully you can see some of the historical photos we have of the building of the plant. There's a little slideshow where you can keep going here. Oh, there's some of this over here. So you can see the plant under construction, the filter beds. And then we have this neat little slider feature where you can kind of look sort of before and after, the plant during construction and now, and also the filter beds. So again, we're just trying to ground people in the plant and kind of what it looks like without being able to go there directly. We go into the process, the treatment process, the main steps. And then here in this section, we go into sort of if you were there, the steps it would go through and what you might see. So it doesn't look like that much from the outside, but of course the raw water aqueduct is very important. And then you can kind of scroll through this slideshow here to see, here's some folks in masks working from the control center on the coagulation process. And then you can kind of go along here. I really like this one because you get to kind of almost dive down into the filter bed, and you hang on a second, you'll see some of the, there we go, some of the little particles that we get out of the water. And so that kind of goes on. You can sort of see the different steps there. And then in this section, we kind of go over the important infrastructure upgrades that we have made to the plant, including, importantly, this bifurcation valve that we installed some years ago to be able to split the plant in two so that we can work on half and then still operate the other half. And there's more slides here that kind of show those investments. But of course, as we know, there's always work ahead. There's always infrastructure investments to be made. And so we have this nice photo here of Jimmy Oloye, our engineering director. And we have a clip of him here talking about, kind of future investments, why it's important to keep that plant obviously in tip-top shape and improving. And so here's a schematic of some of the future investments that we're looking at. We show some, here's a clip that I won't show, but it's a few of our engineers talking about some of the future improvements at some of the other plants that we have in the works or have recently completed. Here we have some of the people who work in the plant or have designed some of the features there. And then here we end with a real EBMUD customer. Just one shout out I want to make to Nelsie Rodriguez on my staff, who really pulled all these together and just jumped on this tool and figured out a way to use it. And so anyway, so that's the tour. Again, you can spend more time with it. We'll send you the link. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And so it's, it's our first step. And I think the next step, of course, will be, depending on the success of this tour, how people receive it, and, the popularity of it. We could think about some other potential virtual tours of things like, Party Dam. We've gotten interest about watershed walks with rangers, maybe the fish hatchery, the McCullough River, and other, critical plants or facilities. We're hoping we're not in virtual world, too long, of course, but we also want to make sure that we're still engaging with our community and our customers so that they kind of understand our mission and our work. So finally, I'll just move on quickly to, to build on all of that online engagement. We are hoping next year, our goal is to begin offering a regular speaker series. And so the idea is that initially we would have these online, but hopefully, of course, later in person. And hopefully basically the idea is that we would have a subject matter expert or department director kind of talk about some key, areas of our work, including financial, budget and rates, emergency preparedness, how we're adapting to, climate change, history of the district. And the topic list is, as you can imagine, it's there's a lot of potential topics. So these are some that we have tossed around. Yep, and here's some more. So we hope that will be in the spring, early part of next year. And of course, we will keep you posted as we flesh that out. So, oh, forgot the water system, sorry. All right, if you have any questions, please, thank you for your time. And I'm happy to follow up with any other information.
I can't, you still are sharing your screen, so I can't see if there's anybody with their hands up, but, oh wait, maybe I can.
This is John.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah. I'm sure we were following protocols, but because we're some sensitive sites with the tour, audio tour that you're producing, which looks great, by the way, are we making sure that we're meeting the FBI standards or the security standards of our facilities? Because I know a number of years ago after 9/11, we had to change our protocol on what we even had on the web.
Yeah, so we're looking through all of these tours through that lens. And so we're consulting with the security folks to make sure that we're not showing anything sensitive or placing anything very specifically or showing any ways to get any access to anything sensitive. So of course, we'll continue to do that.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
This looks great. I would definitely concur with adding the hatchery to the program. It's not just about where people couldn't go or were able to go before COVID and the emergency. I think this is about making our facilities more accessible. I think this could be usable in classroom settings as well as for the general public. And I'm really excited that we're doing this. Thank you.
Yeah, I love the education page and the photos are great. It's just, I think it's just a great way to tell East Bay Mud's story and really, post-COVID, actually entice people to learn more and, take more advantage of in-person, opportunities. So I think it just really just opens, sort of opens the doors to increasing customer appreciation of the resource and the effort and, everything about where the water comes from, where it goes, et cetera. So I saw John's hand.
Yeah. Tying off of what Andy said, one area that might be of interest that would be really good for our partners up country is to talk a little about what we're doing with UMRIT on the watershed protection, whether it be from a standpoint of, the 10 million we received for clearing out dead trees last year and how that has a positive impact for the environment and water supply. And I think our partners up country would appreciate that too.
All the brooms that we're buying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, they're vacuums with long
Oh,
extension
okay.
cords.
No sweeping, just vacuuming. Okay.
So I just want to jump in and pretty much say the same as everyone else. This actually is one of those silver linings in the lockdown, if you will, that allows us to come up with ideas like this. That seems like, oh, why didn't we think of this before? Because just seems like a great way to show off our facilities, tell our story, and doesn't negate our ability to do in-person tours, because nothing can replace them entirely, but this opens up a whole new audience. I think it's just great.
For that feedback.
Great. Okay, next.
So our next item, Derry Moten, Manager of Employee and Organizational Development, is going to give an update on our racial equity and justice and diversity and inclusion master plan projects. This is going to be similar to the presentation he gave this morning to the Legislative Human Resources Committee meeting.
Good afternoon, board members. We're going to provide you an overview here of the steps that have been taken as we're continuing to move forward with the project. The agenda for today will be that, make sure I have control here. There we go. So the agenda for today is we'll be giving an update on the Racial Equity and Justice Project, the Diversity Inclusion Master Plan. We'll go over the schedule, look at next steps, pose questions for you as a board of directors, and then we'll do a quick review of your Racial Equity and Justice and Diversity Inclusion Master Plan objectives that we asked you for previously. We want to vet those with you and make sure that we recorded those properly and that there are no gaps in the information. So for our Racial Equity and Justice Project, we have several task forces, 2 task forces specifically that are moving forward right now. Task Force Strategy 1, providing safe space for dialogue for our employees, and Strategy 6, which is protocols for employees interacting with customers and law enforcement. So both strategies are in the process of implementation. The teams are meeting weekly on the projects. We've had very strong engagement from all the participants that are part of these 2 working groups, and they've been both identifying opportunities and challenges that they're working on right now. So for Strategy 1, we're looking at methods for reaching out to employees that are not currently connected to our affinity groups or advocates. And so within the discussion that we've had so far is that the team has been looking at engaging each of our affinity groups with ongoing opportunities for listening sessions. So we began with the Black Employee Network, and now we've actually met with the rest of the affinity groups, and each of the affinity groups, Reigning Pride, APEA, and Fuerza Latina, are all working on processes for actually engaging their membership with listening sessions as well. So what we did identify in the dialogue was that we are going to be able to cover those populations, but we still need to find ways to be able to reach out to other people who are not directly connected to those affinity groups. And so the team is working on options with that for the long term. One of the ideas that they are doing is integrating the work that the advocates have been working on in creating a overall employee engagement survey. And with that survey, the team is now looking at that to potentially take the content that's in that survey and expand that so that we're actually also asking some questions about racial equity and diversity overall. So we're looking at ways we can kind of expand that. That would become an ongoing tool for listening overall. The other thing that they've been doing is looking at ways to build trust in discussions around a lot of these items that have been taboo to talk about. So that we have groups of people who have never really talked about race openly in the workplace or talked about diversity, talked about other types of things. We've always had harassment prevention training, but in many ways that training has been one way in terms of just telling people what not to do and how to stay out of trouble. But in this case, we're actually asking people to have more productive conversations about how we allow diversity to evolve as a business practice, and looking at ways that we define diversity, looking at how we use diversity as a tool for productivity as opposed to just identifying differences between people. So that group is going very well. They're getting a lot of good dialogue, and they're looking at ways that we'll be able to, again, continue listening past where we are right now. And strategy 6 in looking at how do our employees interact with customers and deal with law enforcement when there becomes some type of pressure or problem. They've broken the work into a couple of different phases. Number one was looking at how to best educate our employees on how to handle circumstances when they arise. Also looking at secondarily, what are their steps of engagement in a situation that turns negative. Then looking at employee support. So once we have a situation that occurs, how do we then support employees? And the other item is about the investigative process and how do we build efficiencies into our internal investigation process once an issue has arisen. So we're looking at this from a couple of different dimensions. And some of the dialogue that has gone into this has had us look a little bit more closely at existing protocols and existing penal codes that would allow us to better understand how to protect employees. So there are existing penal codes that do make it criminal to harass public employees. And so how do we make sure both our employees and our systems accommodate for that? The other thing is looking, OGC and Marlene's group have been able to work together to start doing some additional research on oncoming legislations that are dealing specifically with public treatment of public employees. So as we're looking at these and having conversations about those, one of the things that we will be doing is pulling a lot of the data that's coming from strategy 6, and that'll help us inform better strategy 7 and 8, which are about law enforcement and our own internal security, about having conversations with them, engaging them. Some of the information that's coming from this group will better inform us on how to help that group have good conversations directly with law enforcement. And we received some information today from one of our groups that is already engaging with East Bay Parks, and East Bay Parks has provided some feedback for us on some of these specific items. So these groups are getting very productive. They're getting a lot of good dialogue going. So we are making some good progress here. Both groups will be providing final data coming up within the next 2 months. So another update for racial equity and justice is that we have completed the hire of our limited term senior human resource analyst. Her name is Jaisha White. She is currently an employee of the state of California. She has been working for the last 13 years on a combination of human resource management, diversity, inclusion, and workforce development projects. So she has worked with Caltrans and with several other state departments as well. So she will be starting with us on October 26th. And so she's kind of passed her foundational screening, and she's in the final process of prepping to come on board. So we're looking forward to having her start with us to expand the team that's working on our project here. So for the diversity inclusion master plan, we've been having some very productive conversations with the Winters group in terms of better understanding their process and understanding that the full range of steps that they'll be taking with us as we're continuing to go forward. They've broken their work really into 3 phases here. One phase has been the internal assessments, which you've heard us talk about previously, which is the focus groups and one-on-one interviews. Also, a big part of this is actually data collection. So they've been collecting policies and procedures from us. They've collected information around our affirmative action plans over the last several years, looked at some of our values work, looked at a variety of other programmatic things that we have going around the district, information about our affinity groups, about some of our diversity outreach. So they've taken a lot of that data, and they will be taking that data and actually using it to benchmark the district on where we stand in terms of a benchmarking tool that I'll describe for you a little later in the presentation here. Phase 2 of this is then our core team and SMT training. Phase 1 has been two courses that have been focused on understanding diversity factors. And then phase 2 will be about understanding racial equity in the workplace. And this will be offered to our core team, which is roughly around 35 individuals right now. And that includes a wide range of staff and then the senior management team as well. So that will be the next phase. At the end of phase 2, what will happen is phase 2 will then lead us into the third phase, which is then building the plan. And the final course of the phase 2 training is going to be a preparation, kind of a working workshop to get us in preparation to use what's called a racial equity toolkit, which will take us through a series of questions and concepts to be able to start drafting our diversity inclusion master plan. That tool is going to have us get some more data about community engagement. It will actually take the core team members and actually assign them to specific projects based on priorities that we determine through the benchmarking process and through some of the questions that we're going to be addressing through the racial equity toolkit. So in terms of the internal assessment, to give you some updates on where we are, we've continued to have focus groups right now. We've had roughly 100 employees go through the focus groups. We've been getting good feedback from them on just their ability, the structure of the focus groups and their opportunity to kind of voice their thoughts and opinions. So that has been positive so far. We're probably about halfway through with the focus groups that will continue through the end of the month here. We also have the one-on-one interviews, which are almost complete. We have probably about 12 individuals that still do need to have their one-on-ones, and we've been interacting with the Winters group on completing that. And as I mentioned, the data collection, they have completed a lot of their data collection and are working on some of the preliminary analysis of data. So they've been giving us some calls, and we've been talking through some of the things that they were making sure that they understand in terms of what we provided for them as far as data is concerned. So the core team and SMT training, I mentioned that there's kind of two phases of training. Phase 1 was, again, training that was directly related to the intercultural development inventory, which was the assessment that we issued to all staff. We had about a 50% response rate on that survey, but that was then followed with courses for the core team to look at our data and to actually do some self-analysis in terms of everyone understanding cultural competence and how we actually work together on a whole. The second phase will be, again, really focused on racial equity training, which gets into organizational processes in which we would then look at how do we start building equity into the organization overall. And as I mentioned, there have been 6 trainings that were part of phase 1. There were 2 courses, but we had 6 sessions altogether. And then phase 2 of the training process will begin at the end of this month. So on October the 27th and 29th will be the first class that will occur. People will do 2 half days to actually get this training in. And again, this will be the beginning of having that dialogue about racial equity from an organizational perspective. So the next phase for the core team training, as I mentioned, is starting at the end of this month. There'll be another training at the very beginning of December. And at the beginning of the new year, we'll have the 3rd training, which will give us the ability to start working toward the actual building of the plan. The creating of the foundation for the first class is about creating the foundation for racial equity. And the second is about elevating understanding and identifying opportunities to implement racial equity. And then the 3rd class is going to be about developing a racial equity plan. And that foundation of that course is the utilization of the Government Alliance for Racial Equity Toolkit as a planning tool. And the Government Alliance for Racial Equity is an organization that has been focused on working with government agencies to actually lay out a 6-phase process for coming about identifying priorities for an organization. So based on those priorities, we would then take the outcomes of that course, and then actually the core team will begin working on priority projects. And our priority projects will be based on, number one, what comes out of the benchmarking process. Number two, what the board has already identified as priorities through the Racial Equity and Justice Project. And then number three, as we look at specific things through this GARE process, will be the third way we'll kind of intersect our overall priorities. In terms of building the plan, part of the process for building the plan, as I mentioned, we translating the internal assessment data into the benchmarking scores, and the benchmarking tool that we'll be using, I'll talk about in just a moment. The second is prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts based on the benchmarking data and aligning priorities with the remaining racial equity and justice strategies. So the tool that they're using to benchmark us with is called the Global Diversity Inclusion Benchmarking Tool. This tool is a benchmarking of roughly 266 benchmarks regarding diversity and inclusion. It's developed by a group of 95 panelists who are specialists in diversity and inclusion from a global perspective. So this is looking at things from a really wide lens in terms of diversity and inclusion and its application to a lot of places. Those 266 benchmarks are broken into 4 practice groupings and 14 categories and discrete actions. So you received a copy of the kind of outline document that outlines the 4 practices and the 14 categories. Those would then drill down into 266 total benchmarks, which will be what the Winters Group is actually benchmarking us on. So to talk about where those break out, the 4 groups begin with the foundation group of items. Those foundation group of items walk us through looking at asking ourselves the question about what is our diversity inclusion vision and strategy. So looking at us, where we're trying to get to, what are we actually as an organization trying to accomplish with diversity, inclusion, and equity, and really building a business case specifically for that. So again, how does this address our productivity? How does this address us as an organization on a whole? The next is leadership and accountability, and I know this is really important to the board because one of the objectives that you all stated that you wanted was to make sure that this is driven by leadership and that leadership is participating actively in supporting diversity, inclusion, and equity overall. Then there's a factor of accountability. How do we actually measure our results, and how do we define success when it comes to these factors overall? And then third is diversity, inclusion, structure, and implementation, which gets into the organizational structure. Where is the best place for diversity inclusion fall within the organization? What we've been doing in addition to this is having some conversations with KUA. KUA has established a diversity inclusion working group, and we've been having some conversations with them about identifying what each of them are doing in terms of planning and looking at the way they're actually delivering diversity and inclusion practices within the organization. And we're kind of in the middle of the road with them. Some of them have made a couple of actions in order to reformat their diversity inclusion efforts. Others are still in the planning process, and we're kind of sharing notes to identify what's some of the best practices that we can engage in terms of looking at how we're going to implement once we complete the diversity inclusion master plan. So the next group is the internal grouping, which gets into issues of recruitment, retention, development, how employees advance throughout the organization in terms of promotion. It looks at benefits, work-life integration, and flexibility, which again is another factor that we're all dealing with in terms of telecommuting and COVID, but what that means for the organization overall. Job design, classification, and compensation. And in job design and classification, specifically for us, one of the items that I think that we'll be looking pretty closely at is kind of our entry-level positions and how do we deploy entry-level positions to identify best opportunities for diversity in the organization on a whole. And then finally, diversity, inclusion, learning, and education, and looking at how do we continue to spread diversity education throughout the organization. And one of the things that we're already working on in anticipation of this is I've been working with my team, which is kind of consolidated diversity, inclusion, and employee development. We're working on doing modifications to our compliance with AB 1345, which is the harassment prevention legislation that we've been working on for the last couple of years. And so what we're doing right now is looking at how can we modify our existing content to actually start integrating some of the practices that we're looking at and some of the specific content that we're looking at in terms of cultural competence and overall approach toward diversity as a business practice for both supervisors and employees.
Gary, may I interject for a second, please?
Yes.
Frank Millen. We have our intern program during the summer. How does that fit in with this?
Yeah, the intern program is something we're looking at in terms of how do we tier the program properly. So right now, one of the conversations we have been having with diversity inclusion right now is that we have the high school internships, we have the college level internships, but we haven't gotten the college level internships on a cyclical process so that they're coming about every year at the same time. One of those factors in building partnerships with external agencies, they all need lead time in order to get their potential candidates into our pools. And so for us, we have to look at how do we look at aligning some of those internships so that they are cyclical in process, also in the demand areas that we have that are identified in the affirmative action plan. And then third, that we are looking then at our potential openings and how do we start to work with hiring managers to align some of those so that we have some natural opportunities to catch some of those individuals that are coming through our own programs. So it is looking at this kind of comprehensively, looking at this from, again, that job design perspective is not only the design itself, but how do we look at the potential for onboarding individuals who are participating in our internships. And that becomes a whole nother factor of us kind of logistically looking at our process.
Thank you.
Derry, this is Marguerite. I mean, there's just keying off of that, and I don't want to move the conversation over into the, sort of hard right or left into the workforce development piece. But I mean, there are, there's Bayworks, there's, Rising Sun, and others that are, also, sort of focused on, local hire diversity, recruiting broadly. And there are also some, and this is something where I think, we could look to, I mean, Bayworks is an example, but there's also like the Workforce Education and Resource Center in Training Center, I think it's WERC, that's in LA. That is a labor management partnership between LA County and SEIU and other unions that are represented in LA County, where the Board of Supervisors, made a very clear, sort of demand that in seeing the retirement of the workforce colliding with an opportunity, or not colliding, but having a confluence of an opportunity to go out and look for ways to bring people into the public sector workforce, at the entry level jobs, and then being very intentional about, advancement, so that we're not just, I mean, it's great to be able to hire engineers of color and from diverse backgrounds, but I think we also, sort of like focusing across the organization as we, engineers and the more professional categories as well. But in the trades, and, you know, sort of public sector generally. I think there's some opportunities of stuff that people are doing, you know, around the state and more broadly that we could also be pulling in.
Yeah, those are good references. I appreciate that. And you know, I think part of this is how do we make natural funnels from each of our programs, because right now our high school and intern programs really aren't connected. So how do we help people make a transition, that if we get talented people from high school, how do we maintain a way to usher them through a college process and beyond? And part of that is partnerships with other agencies. And as you mentioned, part of it is working with some of our local agencies to cultivate supportive relationships with individuals going through to where they're ready to come into entry-level positions. So going into the next thing is the next area starts to address to a degree some of this that we're talking about right now, which is next is the bridging group, which gets into number one, looking at our internal measures and our internal assessment on how we're doing long-term. So building metrics into the organization, which are looking at diversity inclusion, looking at our overall diversity inclusion communications, which gets into how do we talk about things in the district? How do we continue to have two-way dialogue with the employee base about our diversity inclusion efforts? And I think inclusion efforts really did get into the issue of retention. So as we are looking at ways to keep diversity, is how do we continue to make sure that people are being engaged and they are actually connected to the organization and being included. The word that's being used a lot is people having a sense of belonging in the organization. And the third is connecting diversity, inclusion, and sustainability. And that kind of carries over into a couple different things. Is number one, in terms of our overall services, how does that connect to the community in terms of again, equality of services and equity of services throughout the service system, which is part of the external group then, and looking at community government relations and then overall social responsibility. And again, I mentioned services in terms of looking at equitable delivery of services of all forms to our customer base. Then dealing with marketing and customer service, and then finally supplier diversity, which gets into all of our contracting and our specific work around contract equity. So our project schedule, we're continuing to move forward. The projects, again, phase 1 and 2, strategies 1 and strategy 6 are making good progress. They're actually both giving us data that's going to be helpful in strategy 7-8 as we move it forward. We also have, again, some opportunities with some of our closest partners that some conversations are already beginning around strategy 8. So that is moving forward. Phase 3 was all of our projects that had a connection directly with the diversity inclusion master plan. And we're going to be using these as part of the priority base as we're starting the planning process with the Winters Group as we're moving forward. And again, we're on track with the Winters Group in terms of getting us into this phase of the secondary level of training, which will lead into the actual development of the master plan. So we're moving well forward with that. So the next steps that we have is, again, we're going to continue to work with strategies 1 and 6 task forces. We're expecting that they will have some information to provide to the board and to the steering committee within a short window of time here. We'll be launching strategies 7 and 8. And again, Jaisha will be coming on board, and those 2 strategies will ones that we will be working with her to take the lead on facilitating. We'll be maintaining, again, a staff communication. The steering committee will be preparing communication for staff to give the overall staff updates on where we are. We'll be continuing the diversity inclusion master plan internal assessment, and hopefully we have that data complete and have some feedback from the Winters Group on preliminary data for the benchmarking information. And then again, as I mentioned before, the phase 2 training for the core team and the SMT is going to begin the end of this month on October 27th and 29th. So our questions for the board is, we want to do a review of the feedback. We're asking for feedback on the November 10th meeting about the 14 categories on the global diversity inclusion benchmarking tool. So I shared with you what those items are and what they look like specifically in terms of those 14 categories in the four groupings. And we'd like to have your feedback in terms of priorities. You know, quite naturally, we will not be able to address everything at one time. But if you looked at that item, the list of items, and you had items that you felt like were strong priorities, we'd like to know what those priorities look like for you. So as we get the benchmarking data, we can use that to continue to build our priorities for the work ahead. And then the other thing we'd like to do is get some feedback from you. We're going to share kind of what we documented in terms of your objectives that you laid out, and we have these at the last step that we're going to review with you. But we'd like to have you for the next meeting also provide us any feedback, or if you identify any gaps or things that we didn't include in that, we'd love to have your feedback about both of those things. So last thing that we have for you is the program objectives. And again, last time we met with you, you provided us feedback on what you felt like were the overall objectives for the programs. We also took that with the steering committee, asked the steering committee members to give us some additional data. We've taken information from both groups and compiled this list of 6 specific items here. Number 1 is defining diversity beyond just race, culture, and gender, and include diversity of opinions and voices and problem solving, connection, and communication with our customers. So that was the first item that we received from you. The second was updating processes to address systemic racism in hiring, contracting, and customer interactions. And again, we'll be working specifically on those things as we're moving forward here. Number 3 is ensuring a level playing field throughout the district for hiring, promotion, and measures of performance. Number 4 is engaging employees in training and dialogue about cultural competency, diversity, equity, and inclusion as business practices. So this integration of diversity and inclusion as practices of business is a big item here. Next is involving leaders at all levels of the district in the promotion and practices of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Number 6 is creating and implementing a process for ongoing employee feedback. And then finally is educating customers on East Bay MUD's stance for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and against racism in any form, and what that means for their rights and responsibilities as customers. And again, part of the work on strategy 6 has been actually having conversations about the combination of rights and responsibilities for customers, and how do we address those if an employee's rights are violated through racism or through some form of bias. But again, those are things that we want to make sure that we develop concepts to deal with that then can be approved by the board as well. And so at this point, I want to open up, and if you have any questions at this point. Director Mellon, yes.
You know, I'm going to harken back to something that, I don't know, if it sounds like you're getting on the edge of. You would be familiar with Deming and the concept of quality circles, wouldn't you?
Yes.
It seems like a tool to use to get to the goals that we're talking about here, because it's a very inclusionary process. And when used in the context of like what you're talking about, it facilitates participation. Because the essence of the Deming principles is your opinion is important. It's necessary for the quality of work that we are going to accomplish. And if we accomplish high quality of work, then our satisfaction levels will be extremely high. And, you know, I don't know how that would play in here, but to me, that seems to be an integral part of where I would like to see us at. And that is not only are our voices of value, but our voices are part of what makes us valued. So I'm probably asking you to dust off an old book tucked away somewhere. And I know that I've got these old books tucked away also that I swore I'd look into someday, and now here I am. So I offer that as a thought from my perspective. And I don't know if that's of any help, and I would certainly be willing to sit down and over a cup of coffee, appropriately spaced, of course, and just talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's actually not far off from kind of the direction we're moving in. And what I mean by that is one of the things that our GM has had as a concept is how do we work toward innovation? And so part of an innovation process is looking not just looking at diversity inclusion not just as kind of a standalone on the side, but really how do we start looking at diversity inclusion as kind of a development process that is leading into what we're doing with our advocates in terms of their work, and then how does that expand into an overall approach toward, again, having diverse ideas, learning how to have dialogue. So again, I don't think it's far off from kind of our direction, but I think it's a good focus point. So yeah, so I'll definitely be open to talking about that more.
Thank you.
I mean, I hope this is the case after November 3rd. But I know the polling isn't looking particularly good, sadly. On Proposition 16, are y'all prepared for, you know, if we are able to dispense with Prop 209, how things can quickly change?
Yes, OGC and HR have been doing the research in terms of looking at combination of what would potentially be allowable. And also we've gone back and actually started pulling data from our historic programming to look at where we made modifications and what those modifications would look like if we were to do some additional shifting. So we are in the process of doing the research right now to be
right. Yeah, I mean, I understand that if it's not, you know, if it's wasted effort, well, maybe it's not wasted effort, but it's you know, it may be for naught, but hopefully it's not for naught. And the coverage I've been reading of people just don't, the measure's not plainly worded enough to make sense. And I imagine that there's nobody spending money to advertise on it. So it's one of those kind of orphan ballot measures in a way. Too bad.
Marguerite, the concept that I was talking about here is
yeah, and I'm familiar. It's I'm somewhat familiar with it.
Yeah, because I think that whether we get the proposition passed or not, this is something we can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, we're not. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Other questions from board members?
I'd like to chime in, if I might, Madam President.
Absolutely.
I'm pleased with the progress we've made so far, and to your comments and to Kevin's response, it is true that EBMUD has continued to pioneer even without Prop 209 being set down. And we have a record in some areas of excelling, especially in bringing people into our system and to how we spend our dollars. I think the one thing that I want to reiterate is that the awareness on the part of people, the core group in the district is in the supervisory area. And while I'm not
Just a moment, Linda.
throwing rocks at anybody, the selection process, which was enumerated in some of our reports that we read, if those are followed, and if there's a follow-up on those, in a conversation between supervisors, and a review when you're getting ready to appoint somebody. There used to be a place that all this got sent to, and there was discussion, and sometimes the recommended person didn't get the job. They were able to reach down and pull somebody else up who helped make their operation reflect the very thing we're talking about, the community. I continue to emphasize those because I say every person in a decision-making situation has an opportunity to make change. And those are the things that all of our employees should remember. We're trying to be a reflection of the community within the district and its makeup in the district, so that the representation, the economics, the very essence of the leadership in the quality of the work we do in water and wastewater services, all will be reflecting that. And that's the real target that we're aimed at. And I only say that to say every person in the district should be aware that they can make a difference in the district. Those are my words.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Others, Lisa?
Marguerite, so we had this presentation during our Ledge HR this morning, and what I would like to suggest going forward, if Derry's going to make a presentation to the entire board, that he does not have to do it in the morning of Ledge HR. If the entire board is going to hear it in the afternoon, that just makes sense. What do you think?
Whoops, that's fine with me. I think, originally,
we want to hear it constantly at Ledge.
yeah, I think we want the whole board, to be engaged.
If it's going to be heard at the board meeting that same afternoon.
Yeah, I think, one kind of compromise might be if there are, sort of more weedy issues that you want committee direction, or you want some direction from the board, but not the full board, that I think you could be selective about, maybe not sharing, having something that goes to Ledge HR, but then doesn't come to the full board because it's
something more specific.
Yeah.
For the Ledge HR.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just as we get, more into this. But I think for overall direction, I think the whole board, it's important for the whole board to be engaged. I do have a question about our new hire, and I can't blank. What's her name again?
Her name is Jaisha White.
Jaisha. Is she, I know the state of California has been deeply involved in the GARE or GARE approach. Has she been highly engaged with that, or?
Yes, she has. She's actually been through the training And so yes, and she has used it in 2 organizations she's worked with so far.
That's great. Okay. Good. Andy?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I definitely encourage the intergovernmental coordination to learn from what the GARE collaborative is doing, and to be able to help inform those participating agencies of what we're learning as well. It's good to see also that we're starting at the top with senior management in terms of training, but I would like to see in the future what the plan is for eventually getting to share that education and involve our middle management and supervisors, because I think that's where a lot of our employees are directly reporting to those individuals too. So I anticipate that may be happening in the future, but wanted to point that out. I'm also very interested in hearing at our next update what we might do in response to the outcome of Proposition 16 to be able to follow through on our contract equity goals.
Okay, thank you.
I think you're muted, President Young.
You're
Okay,
muted.
thank you. Yeah, thank you, Derry. I'm shifting screens between my agenda and Zoom.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you, Derry. Yeah, so next up, Clifford is
The coronavirus update.
coronavirus update.
So Mike Ambrose, Acting Director of Operations and Maintenance, will make the presentation. I will say that at the end of the presentation, Andrew Lee, the Manager of Customer Community Services, will share with you our plans to address water meters that are showing use, but where we have no customer of record.
Okay. Good afternoon, President Young and members of the board. As Clifford mentioned, Andrew Lee and I are going to partner on this presentation. I'm going to give you an update on where we stand in our operating areas in relation to the pandemic, and then Andrew's going to talk about customer assistance and inactive accounts. So I'll start with the blueprint for safer economy. I think you've seen this several times before. This is the state's framework for reopening the economy, and it's a county by county assessment. At the top is the highest risk, where the coronavirus is widespread, and at the bottom is the less risk, minimal. It's based on the numbers of new cases per 100,000 population and positive tests. And we've had some great progress in the state of California recently. Contrast that to the rest of the country. This table shows you where we stand. This was as of 10/6, and they update the data every Tuesday. So it was updated today, and Alameda County went from substantial to moderate. So Alameda County, Amador County, and Calaveras County are making great progress in addressing the pandemic. And consequently, there are more businesses and other activities that are being opened. Contra Costa and San Joaquin counties are lagging behind somewhat. And so what that means is that significance to us is that schools can now start to open. In Alameda County, they've said that after the 13th today, that elementary schools will be allowed to open. That's with a reopening plan. That doesn't mean they necessarily will, but there is the opportunity there. And then middle and high schools will be considered in 4 to 12-week phases. So they will follow based on the experience that is seen with the elementary schools. And I put in the slide that Contra Costa County had no specific updates. They did change their website today, and so schools are allowed to open in Contra Costa County based on a plan that's consistent with the California Department of Public Health, their guidance. This graph just shows the our own employees' leave of coronavirus-related leave. You can see that it's starting to trend down. We didn't see a bump from the Labor Day weekend, which is good. We're going to have to maintain that, our diligence there because, it's starting to be flu season. We're getting into the winter time, so we don't want that to bounce back up. We want it to continue on a downward trend. So I'm going to hand this over to Andrew Lee, and I'll advance the slides for you, Andrew. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mike, and good afternoon, board members. And so, as Clifford mentioned earlier, my update is really on the district's ongoing efforts supporting our customers during COVID, and going over a trend that we're seeing with inactive accounts and our recommendation to address this trend. As you know, the district became one of the very first water companies to suspend water shutoff as a direct response to COVID. And we also have restored water service to all customers with an active account that was shut off due to non-payment. So they have access to water during this declared emergency. Now, you also know that COVID brought on many challenges. And one of those challenges is the financial hardship it brought to a lot of our customers, especially for families in our disadvantaged communities. So in response, the district have outreach to our customers about our cap through a number of media, newspaper, email, social media, and regular mailing. We also work with our community partners, such as the local food banks, to get our cap material directly to their homes so they can become aware of what is available to help to pay their water bill. And as of this morning, my report shows that we have over 8,100 active cap participants on our program. And we will continue to make ourselves ready and also available to help customers that are impacted by COVID through CAP and other district programs. Mike, please to advance the next slides. So while we're working to restore water to the active accounts, we also noticed that a number of inactive accounts are showing up with a lot of water use. And those number of accounts are increasing on a monthly basis. So inactive accounts are typically tied to properties where occupants have moved out and there's no active customers signed for service. So given that, we would see no water use for those inactive accounts. But since March, we did find that there are cumulatively over 1,700 inactive accounts with water use identified. So this inactive accounts are, as you can see on this map to the right, is spread, throughout the district, but primarily in Oakland and Richmond and Berkeley area. And looking at this visual here, those accounts are primarily, is located along the Highway 880 corridor. So some resemblance to some of where the CAP participation is. So that's gonna just a really quick visual and showing the board where those accounts are located. And also to the left is kind of a pie chart showing some of the numbers by city and where those accounts are located. Like I mentioned earlier, primarily is in the three cities of Oakland, Berkeley, and Richmond. Mike, please advance to slide number 8. So the next slide really, help diving deeper into the data. And within the number of inactive accounts showing water use, about 78% of those are residential, which include some that are multifamily, obviously. And then 22% of those are commercial. And out of those 1,700 accounts, there are about 735 of them have usage that is greater than 3,000 gallons per month. So we did the math and we add up everything. We are seeing approximately about 30 million gallons in unaccounted water use dating back to kind of towards the end of January. So what does that mean financially? It's approximately about $416,000 in unaccounted for revenue. So again, the pie chart kind of showing the the allocation of the account by business type. Blue is the single family, and then the gray is the commercial accounts. And then the 69 on the orange is the multifamily.
And what's the break on the 735? Is it split kind of the same?
Nearly the same. I didn't look at that number yet, but I can provide that.
Okay.
You're talking about split among those three categories as shown on the pie chart.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. These three categories.
I can definitely take a look at that.
Okay.
Mike, please advance to slide number 9. So some of the common reasons why inactive accounts have shows use. One of the most common one is leaks on the private plumbing. So meaning that because we keep the account that the meters on. So if there's a leak and someone moved out, that meter will still keep turning. There's an instance where customers delay to sign up for an account to activate the new service from the move in and move out process. And then of course, the very last one is unauthorized water use. Next slide.
So Andrew,
yes,
just to be clear here. So you're saying that even though like when you move into a house, you're supposed to call and get your water turned on, your water is actually on. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. In most cases that we don't go out there, when someone sign off, like let's say if I move out from my house, I would call the district and say, I want to make my account inactive, I'm signing off. We don't go out there and turn the meter off physically and we actually leave it, we just note it on the system, but the meter remains on. But then we do still read it every reading cycle. And that's how we detect if there's a meter have shows use or zero use. And we compare the notes, and that's how we discover shows use on an inactive account.
Okay.
So on slide number 10 now, so we do have existing process to manage water use on inactive accounts. So when those are detected, obviously we go and visit the site to verify if there's actual use. And if the premise is vacant and there's no evidence of occupancy, of course, likelihood in the private system is very high. So in those cases, we do shut the water off. And if the premises appears to be occupied and have someone living there, we would leave a physical notice at the door to make sure that they advise of, to sign up for account. There's a number for them to call, an email to contact us. And then we work with them to get them on the account so they can become a customer of EBMUD. Now, if we don't get a response, we do conduct a very final visit to the premise, and we at that point shut off the water. That's the current process. So moving on to the slide number 11, Mike, please. And so we want to ensure that occupied properties continue to have water, of course, during this declared emergency. And because of that, we are recommending the following steps. So in order to address this 1,700 properties that have shows use, but with no active customers signed on for service, we would direct staff to go out there and visit those properties. And we would do one more round of notice to ask those properties to sign up for service. Of course, we will work with each of the occupants if there's someone living in those premises to start, to set up an account in order to maintain the service. If those premises are occupied. And in the case, reach them, we will offer, if they experience hardship, definitely offer a number, our programs, including CAP, and to help them, have, to manage their water bill. But in cases that when we don't see anyone living in those premises, or they becoming unresponsive to our final notice, we are recommending that to turn off those water services. And then if they do end up calling the district at that point, of course, we're going to go out there and work with them to restore the service and get them on the account. But the key thing is that we do want to make sure that in the water being used is someone is signed up for that service. And that's the recommendation going forward. And I think the last slide here is just really for questions the board may have.
Other folks with questions? I have one other question and a comment.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, here's my so Andrew, have you been able to understand? So, I mean, I didn't know. Gee, I could have been like using water all this time and never. I mean, it seems like that it's a kind of a loophole that if somebody, I don't know, was moving from here from somewhere else and didn't realize that water just didn't kind of flow from the tap, that you were moving into a place and you didn't set up water service, that you'd have it, right? It says it's like, because we're talking about 3,000 gallons is what, 4 units or something like that, around that?
About five units, yeah.
5 units, okay. And this is like 0.3% of our customers-ish, of our accounts.
I don't work fast with numbers.
Well, I don't either. I did it with the calculator, but
that's a good number.
it's a small. I mean, it's a big number, but it's a small number. In relative terms, not insignificant, and certainly that amount of water is not insignificant. Bill is trying to get back into the call. Is that, do we know how much of this is transient? So it's people that are delaying, turning on their service, and after a month or whatever, it's like, I haven't gotten a water bill. Oh, maybe I need to sign up for water. Do we have a sense of that? Like what percentage of it is?
I don't have a number on that, and I don't know how accurate we can try, get down to a number on that. But in the case like what you're mentioning is that we do, in normal circumstances, without the current order of, suspending shutoff, we do have a normal process where you have someone that do move in and they forgot to sign on. We do ask those customers, based on the read, we do ask them to show us proof that when they move in to those properties. So in those cases that they are becoming we call it back responsible for those usage back all the way up to the time that they move into the property. So if it's a lease, then they would show us the lease, or if it's a purchase home, they would show us kind of the time that when they start move, the transaction when it was closed. So we do require some of that documentation to kind of help us what the new customer is actually responsible up to.
Okay.
We do go out there and do read the meter when someone move out of, let's say if I move out of my home, the district does go out there and make sure that we capture what the last read is on that meter before that person leaves the premises.
Right.
So this is
right. So, and we're still doing that process now.
We still have that process. The reason that we bring this up to the board is because it's kind of the sensitivity around shutoff, right?
Right.
And so we just want to make sure we are all aware of that. This is the actions we're going to take. We may get some, feedback from folks that may be impacted by this, the step we're taking. So, but the thing is that the answer is that we are working with them when they call us. The issue is that we do need someone to sign on for service, and it's not about a shutoff. And also too, it's really, if you have let's say if you have a 3,000, 5,000 gallon leak a month on your house, we need to make sure that we protect those properties from that, that level of damage from leaks. So there's a number of reasons from both looking at, making sure that we address, the water use on the customer side, but at the same time, on a practical level, we want to make sure that whatever that coming through the system, and if it's a vacant property, we don't want any damages on the property.
Yeah, no, the idea of shutting off water from obviously unoccupied, properties makes sense. My take on the proposal, the recommendation is that, it looks like we're making a best effort to try to get people signed up. We're not telling them to pony up money or, anything like that, right?
Exactly.
Or make good on, past readings or, past use necessarily. I assume it'd be sort of a case by case basis for the past use. It makes, it makes sense to me, and that we're not shutting people off. As long as they're signed up, we're not shutting people off during the pandemic. So I see a hand, but I can't see whose it is.
John Coleman.
Director Coleman.
John, go ahead.
Why is he muted?
John, you need to come off mute.
Am I off mute now?
Yes.
Hello? I can't see anybody other than whoever talks, and
he got
Frank and I got
dropped
moved. Maybe I'm coming back into it now. Okay, there we go. Okay, I'm fine now.
John, you didn't have a comment, or you do?
No, my comment was I wasn't sure if I was being able to listen to you or reply back. I'm finding where things are heading.
Okay, so you're having technical difficulties. Okay.
Yeah.
Frank and I were having technical difficulties. We're back in the saddle.
Okay.
Anyone else with feedback or questions for Andrew? Or Mike, I guess, since he just did a quick handoff.
Okay.
Okay, well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Andrew.
I think that's it. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you so much.
And I'll just close. Last item attached to your packet is the monthly report, so I can answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions from folks on the monthly report? Okay, moving on to reports and director comments. Committee reports from the September 22nd Finance and Administration Committee meeting is included in the agenda packet for today. A report from Doug on the Planning Committee, and then from Director Coleman on the Ledge HR Committee.
Okay, the planning committee met this morning at 9:30, and we heard reports on the wet weather program management, an update, also a report and update on the Los Vaqueros reservoir expansion project.
Okay. Director Coleman?
Sure, just real quick, the Ledge HR met this morning, and our two big items we already discussed in as part of the agenda, HR 675, and then by Marlene, and the great report by Derry. So that's what we did today.
Great. Okay. Are there any director comments?
Is Bill still on the line?
He is.
I know. Are you back on, Bill? Yeah, go ahead.
Two things. One, I didn't get your permission, and I did talk to Cliff yesterday because of all the craziness with my computer today. But I did want to see if I could submit a small addition related to Joe Morgan's death. He was a customer of EBMUD living in Danville. And I'm also supposed to say a word or two about Gwen McDonald, our former HR director. So I don't know when you want those to come, but
I thought, yeah, that's fine. Now is fine. I know we were going to adjourn in Gwen McDonald's memory, and I'd certainly be fine adding Joe Morgan to that list. And if you have, unless other board members have comments about other items, we can move to that.
All right.
I don't see anybody else, or looks like Frank wants to say something.
I was
Oh,
going
you,
to comment on Gwen McDonald, so
okay,
I'll defer to Bill first.
okay.
Yes, well, I'll start with Gwen in that case. Today, we recognize former East Bay MUD Manager of Human Resources, Gwen McDonald. Gwen joined the district on September 3rd, 1996. During her 16 years at the district, she oversaw implementation of many programs, including the Management Leadership Academy, Pathways, and the Benefits University. She also built relationships and worked collaboratively with staff on various stakeholders and various stakeholders throughout her career. Gwen retired from the district in 2012 and remained in contact with her East Bay MUD family through the Old Timers dinners and other events. Many of her colleagues remember her warm smile and seeing her walking around Lake Merritt. We were all saddened to hear of her passing in August. We would like to honor Ms. McDonald by closing today's meeting in honor of her contributions to East Bay MUD. Frank, you can go ahead now.
That most people don't know that date all that well when we got Gwen on board, but before then we were having a reception for a past general manager who was going to be going from transitioning from temporary to general manager, Dennis Steamer. And Gwen had previously interviewed for that position with Dennis's predecessor and decided that that style of management was not what she had in mind. But when Dennis came, I dragged her over to the reception and I said, you want to talk to this person because you want her to work with you because you two will do well. And Gwen came away from that meeting and said, well, when is the job going to be posted? And I said, right now. And so I will take responsibility for Gwen coming over, but by way of background, she and I shared the same mentor.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing relationship because she took the public sector route, I took the private sector route, but we always kept bumping into one another. And I always wanted the opportunity to work with her directly. Who knew that one day it would be through East Bay MUD? So as Bill has said those wonderful words about Gwen, for me, it's got some deep personal attachment and I will miss her a great deal. Thank you, Marguerite, for letting me speak.
I love it.
Unmute, absolutely. And thank you, Bill, as well. And I'm assuming we are preparing a letter, and then you want to speak about Joe Morgan a bit, Bill, as well.
The one thing I wanted to say to everybody is that this is not a made comment. I took some notes off ESPN after receiving a phone call early in the morning on Monday that Joe had passed. I think while most people remember Joe's achievements in baseball, I had the pleasure of knowing his achievements in the community. Joe was always at my right hand throughout his youthful days and when he went into the majors, helping in the civil rights movement and helping make Oakland a better place. it is said that if you take all the great athletes who came out of Oakland and put them together and what they gave back, they would not equal what Joe did through his foundation. Young people of Oakland shared in his success. He was always there for them in the Little League ball and whatnot, donating thousands of dollars of equipment so that those leagues and those kids could go forward. And to the play fields and to the efforts of programs, visiting juvenile hall, getting kids out of juvenile hall and back into school. Those were all efforts that he championed. And in all of my listings for the various offices and committees and commissions and whatnot that I sit on, Joe was always there supporting me in my efforts. And I wanted just to call that to everybody's attention and say it wasn't just about baseball. Although in the words of, and I'm taking this off the ESPN statement by John Bench, and John Bench was the first of the Big Red Machine to enter the Hall of Fame. And he says of Joe Morgan, and I quote, "Joe Morgan was quite simply the best baseball player I ever played against or saw." That's what he sent forward. And of course, John is respected by everybody. He took me to Cincinnati, and they had a dedication ceremony for Joe there. They sculptured him, and he is at the entrance to the stadium in Cincinnati. I took a picture with him in the unveiling, and he took me down on the baseball field when they honored him just before the game. And they put him in the Hall of Fame at Cincinnati. And Joe let me make that trip with him. A 5-time Gold Glove Award winner in the 8 years that he played for Cincinnati. He went to the All-Star game and represented them all 8 years. There are few players who can be 2-time National League Most Valuable Player in the finals in winning the championship. Joe was a leader in all the things that he touched. Vice President of the Hall of Fame body that makes all those major decisions around the athlete. He ascended that ladder as well. I can only say that I wish his family, his children, and all that he touched well, and hope that he will be remembered, and ask that we close this meeting in his honor. 77 years on the planet, and he's looking down on us now. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Beautiful words.
Very well honored, Director Patterson. Okay, well, with that, we will adjourn today's meeting in honor of both individuals, Joe Morgan and Gwen McDonald, and we will reconvene here for our next meeting, which is on the 27th of October. Thank you, everyone.